The show is about to start. Thank you for your cooperation. Enjoy the show, and please come back and visit us again.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Mike. Happy birthday to.
Hello and welcome, my friends. We appreciate you being here. Tonight is a special night. As many of you know, I have been a host of Darkness Radio, a guest host on Coast to Coast AM, and we talk about the strange and the supernatural, and I've been doing that now for 16 years. But one thing I've been very open about throughout all of my programs is talking about my love of music, which I believe is a mystical journey as it is. We find music, and it opens us up to new worlds. I have to thank my neighbor, Karen Abel, for introducing me to the band we're going to discuss this evening. Karen was the girl that lived across the street. We were best buddies from a very early age and ended up having a child together. Our daughter, Jen, who is not a Monkees fan. I guess genetics don't always carry over as fan bases should. But Karen and I loved the Monkees. She opened my mind up to it. I watched it on TV on WFLD, channel 32 in Chicago growing up, and absolutely loved the Monkees. And it was the music. It was the comedy. It was just feeling like these were the kind of guys you wanted to be best friends with. That's how good of actors they were. I mean, they just made you feel like they were your neighbors. They were the everyman, but they could sing and they could act and they could have a lot of fun. And obviously, we've just suffered a loss in the Monkee Kingdom, right? With the passing of Mike Nesmith, as our good friend Henry Dilt says, from one room into another. And I saw online an outpouring of love, of people posting in random places talking about Mike Nesmith and Peter Tork and Davy Jones that preceded them in death, and how they affected and impacted their life. And I realized that the internet had turned into this kind of groovy grief session. And I thought, well, you know what? Why don't we do this fun little remembrance, a memorial, if you will, where we can talk and have fun and be enlivened. We want to involve you, the listeners, the viewers of this live stream. We will be watching questions and comments you can pop up. We've got some special guests that are going to be joining us throughout the evening. And I'm excited about doing this because, again, this was my first real foray into music. I always heard it in the background, but I didn't grow up a Beatles guy. I grew up to appreciate their music much later. But the Monkees, that was my band. And when Beatlemania was all the rage in the 70s, when the play and stage show of Beatlemania was breaking, my buddies and I would play Monkee Mania. And I remember going to school and digging through the lost and found to find a green knit hat with a little bumble on top so I could be the Mike of the group. And we would play in the backyard and play records and lip sync to them and have a great time. And boy, those really awaken a lot of memories. I don't have many memories of my childhood, but the Monkees are pretty much entrenched in most of them. And I loved it. And as I became a teenager, I had a few of my mom's hand-me-down albums. I think I had more of the Monkees and the first Monkees album, and had pretty much worn grooves in those. And I needed more. I wanted more. And through a friend of a friend, I was introduced to a gentleman who I would know to become the historian, the archivist of the Monkees. And he also became my pusher. He became the man that fed my addiction. Because the first time we met in a little parking lot, I think near a Holiday Inn near Maywood Park or something ridiculous, there was this guy that pulled up, and in his car, he had a box full of Japanese released Monkee albums. He had Monkees t-shirts. He had Monkees merchandise, and we left with a very, very big assortment of Monkees merchandise, and I'm forever in his debt. Not just because of all the cool stuff he had. I think I literally still owe him hundreds of dollars from the 1980s when we were introduced, and all the Monkees shit I ended up buying and keeping in my house. All of that stuff I still have throughout my house, and love it. He was one of the first adults beside my mom that I connected with the Monkees. He was a few years older than me and never treated me like a kid because we were on equal ground. It was Monkees, it was music, it was the fascination, and I really enjoyed that. And then through my meeting with him, he introduced me to who I would know as the photographic archivist of the Monkees. And we had a chance to meet up with this gentleman at one of the Monkees conventions. That's right, back in the 80s, guys, before Dragon Cons and Wizard Worlds and all of the crazy fan fests that are out there. A very small, dedicated group of Monkees fans and aficionados would put together these conventions and sway whoever they could to come out and spend some time and get to meet with us and answer our questions. And one of the first guys I had a chance to meet in that world is going to join us right now as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, my first two real buddies in the Monkees field are here with us right now. One of them you will know as a world-renowned photographer. He has taken photos of every major musical act you could possibly imagine. He is representative of so many different album covers when album covers were an art form. And he is with us tonight. He has studios on both coasts, and he is here with us. And along with him, Gary Strobel and Henry Diltz. Hi, guys. Welcome.
Hey.
It
Peace
is
and love. Ringo
peace and love.
Starr. Yeah.
It is great to see you guys. Gary, do you remember that first meeting in the parking lot of what was it? Some CDS hotel?
I think it was Maywood. I think it was Maywood Park because that was a halfway point for us.
That's right. Yeah.
And so that would be what, 1981, I think.
It was somewhere early in the 80s. Yeah, I think it might have been around 82, 81, 82. And we just connected. And first of all, I have to know, how the hell did you have like cases of Japanese related Monkee albums?
Well, I worked for a record distributor at that point called Sound Unlimited in Skokie, Illinois. And they got imports, and all of a sudden the Monkees were the biggest thing in Japan. And these records came into Sound Unlimited, and I bought as many as I could so I could share and spread the word about the Monkees, because it wasn't cool at that point to be a Monkees fan.
No, so it really wasn't.
I wanted to keep it going, and here was a younger fan. And you still owe me money. No.
Yeah, I'm confident of that. It was great because I think I bought every Monkees album you had available at that time. I think the only one I didn't get was Changes.
Well, they didn't release that one, but
right.
Yeah, Japan had released a Kodak commercial with the song "Daydream Believer," and there was this whole big resurgence.
What song is it?
Daydream Believer.
I'm not familiar. Wait, let me see.
Cheer up, sleepy dream.
Yeah, I might remember that song. My friend Allie Cotton, who videotaped that in 2011, she shared that little clip.
Thank you for sharing that. Yes, that became the Monkees Anthem. I mean, it was the song that they would close the show, every show pretty much,
and
throughout the years.
Now they were playing that in, what was it, a Polaroid or a Kodak commercial in Japan?
It was Kodak commercial, yes.
And during that commercial, were they showing Henry Diltz photographs that he was getting no credit or money for?
No, actually, he supplied the photos for some book in Japan, and then Henry never bothered to bill them, so he didn't get paid till like 3 or 4 years later when I first came out to California and met Lester Sill and said, "Do you know how to reach Henry Diltz?" And I said, "Yes, he's my friend." And so Henry finally got paid after all those years.
Did that happen? Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I mean, you never saw the check, Henry, but Gary definitely collected
But you know that song was written by my very dear friend John Stewart, who had been in the Kingston Trio.
Right.
And he wrote that song. He said he wrote it in 5 minutes, shaving in the mirror. He actually knew a girl whose name was Sleepy Jean. I met her up in Northern California.
Wow.
And he wrote that song about her. And then my pal Chip Douglas, who I sang with in the Modern Folk Quartet, played it for John. I mean, played it for the Monkees, because Chip and John and I had sung that song many times on the road. And when Chip became the Monkees producer, he said, "I've got a song that might be good for you guys," and played him that song, and that became their huge, huge hit.
Do you remember, Henry, you were with the band, the Modern Folk Quartet, the MFQ. When you were singing that song, how different a version was it from what we end up hearing the Monkees version?
There was one word was different.
Okay.
Because he said, "You once thought of me as a white knight on a steed." And John's version went, "Now you know how funky I can be," which is kind of the point of the whole song. So Chip recorded it, and they sang that, and Lester Sill at the record company said, "Chip, buddy, we can't have Davy saying funky. You got to change that." So now it goes, "Now you know how happy I can be," which of course, changes the whole meaning of the song. I once saw that Canadian singer Anne Murray at the Hollywood Bowl, and she had a hit with that song as well. And when she introduced it live at the Hollywood Bowl, she said, "Now I'm going to sing a song, and I defy anybody to tell me what it means, because without saying, you once thought of me as a white knight on a steed. Now you know how funky I can be." Right. Well, that's the crux of the song, So when you say, "Now you know how happy I can be," it doesn't compute.
Well, it obviously computed to millions in sales.
Oh, yeah, but that "Cheer Up, Sleepy Jean," I mean, God. So beautiful.
It's funny. It reminds me as a Bruce Springsteen fan as well, when he was doing his Storytellers and he was talking about the song "Blinded by the Light." And he said, "Here's a song I released and I put it out there. And the only difference is my line was wrecked up like a deuce," which is like a little deuce coupe, wrecked up like a deuce, another runner in the night. They said wrecked up like a douche, which is a feminine cleaning product. But their song blew up. My song did not. So I guess the public have spoken. It's funny how one word can hinge on everything. Funny. Oh, that's cool. So you go out there. Was it the same type of arrangement for that song, though, Henry?
Pretty much. I mean, we didn't have a tambourine, and I played the 5-string banjo. But, the melody and the words were the same. I mean, Davey sang it great. I mean, his little English accent, just really made it. I mean,
Well, that is an iconic song. Gary, do you know about this? I'm curious. When they came with a song, was there always an idea, this is a Davey song, or this is a Mickey song? Or would they each take shots at it to see whose voice fit that melody, that sound?
Well, in the beginning, they were given these songs, and Tommy Boyce and Bobby Hart, who did the early sessions, they had an idea of who would probably have the best shot to sing it. And then Jeff Barry got involved, and all of the Monkees, I think, had a crack at "I'm a Believer." But then when Chip got on board, he had an idea, Chip Douglas, or Douglas Farthing Hatlett, depends on what name he would use at the time. He had ideas, but they would hear these songs, and then they would yell out, I want to do this one, or I want to do this one. So when Harry Nilsson came into the studio, he did like 7 songs, played for them at RCA Studios. And they all wanted to do a particular song. Well, Davey chose "Cuddly Toy," and that became a fantastic video on the TV series, and also a great track on the album. was released, I think, in England or Australia, but it never got released as a single here in America, which happened a lot.
Which is strange, though, since it was featured on the show.
That's correct.
Very
correct. Yeah.
I like this. Let me check it out. Trisha Irvin says, my friend and I wrote Davey a fan letter when we were in high school and told him we'd done a version of I'm Gonna Buy Me a Dog for a School Talent Show, and he actually wrote us back. Gary, was this a real letter back from Davy Jones, or were there secretaries like the Beatles had signing and sending letters back?
Well, I would say it's probably legitimate because Davy, during the breaks, would go to his dressing room and he would answer fan mail. I mean, I wasn't there on set. Henry might remember that, but he would have tons of fan mail. But Davy, to this, till he left us, he was sending packages to me or my younger brother, and it was all handwritten, and he'd go to the post office. And I mean, so that's the type of guy that Davy Jones. So I would say it's probably authentic.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Tony says Henry Diltz is an amazing rock photographer. He basically became the fifth Monkee through his work. His friendship with Nez goes deep, as Nez admired Henry as a musician way back as the Monkees were just taking off. That's right. Gary, you were telling an interesting story, and maybe Henry would like to relate that. You actually uncovered a fan letter from Mike Nesmith pre-Monkees to Henry Diltz with the Modern Folk Quartet.
That is correct. Henry, as I was helping him with his archives through all these years, I've known Henry now 39 years. It's kind of...
It's been that long. Wow. Went by like that.
I know. Henry, sometimes it feels like 56 years, doesn't it?
So anyway, this fan letter was Michael Nesmith. It was June of 1965, and he delivered it to the Troubadour when the MFQ was playing a couple of weeks. And Michael was in this quandary of what to do with his career, because now it was folk rock and everybody's playing electric instruments. And he wasn't quite sure he wanted to do that, because he did try it. But what's so interesting is, you know, Henry and I spent a weekend with Michael a couple of years ago. I brought the letter. Michael read the letter. Henry was there right next to him as he's reading the letter, and they're sharing their thoughts about what was going on. And it's available on Ed Heffelfinger shot the video. And if you go, it's on YouTube now, I think it just got posted, but it's quite remarkable. And
it was a long kind of rambling letter, you know, which he finally got to the point at the end was that, you know, we should think hard about getting into this new music. I mean, we were, you know, kind of pure folk music. We had acoustic instruments, and we did 4-part harmonies. We even had a stand-up bass, you know, and then like all the folk groups, when the Beatles played Ed Sullivan in '64, we were on the road up in New England. We pulled into a motel early so we could get a room and get a TV and watch that, because we'd heard about the Beatles, but I'd never really heard a Beatles song, but we kept hearing about them all the time. Well, what's all this about? What's the fuss, you know? So we sat there and watched the show and went, "Oh my God, I want to hold your hand." I mean, wow, that was joyful. And we went, what are we singing about the ox driver for? You know, we should be singing that kind of joyful music. And we went out the next week and got an electric bass, got rid of the big old stand-up bass that we were hauling around the country. And we went electric. I mean, I electrified my banjo. We got a drummer. And Mike wasn't sure that we ought to go that route. You know, he hated to see us kind of succumb to the new thing. But that's musical history. That's what happened, you know. Not only did groups then go electric, but they started writing their own songs, like the Beatles did. Mm-hmm. The Beatles and Bob Dylan was writing songs a la Woody Guthrie. And because before that, you had the songwriters and you had the singers. Right? I mean, Frank Sinatra never wrote any songs. Elvis Presley never wrote any songs. The songwriters wrote those, and the singers would sing them. But after the Beatles and Dylan, people started writing their own songs, and then you got Joni Mitchell and Neil Young and James Taylor and Paul Simon and all those people. That was a new thing, a sea change in the music industry. the artist is now telling his own feelings.
Mhm.
It's his own poetry, his own thoughts and feelings about life. And that was very, very interesting. I mean, somebody like especially Joni Mitchell, writing her autobiographical songs, it was much better than, some Tin Pan Alley, June, Spoon, Moon rhyme,
But damn it, Henry, your bucket had a hole in it, and I'm glad I knew about it. See, folk music had its place. Now,
Yeah.
I'm curious, Henry, it seems like at one point, every musician that ever crossed the threshold into Los Angeles tried out for the Monkees. Did you ever try out?
No, I didn't, but Jerry Yester did, who was in our group.
Right.
One of the 4 members of the quartet. He went down and they liked him. He would have made a good Monkee. He would have been Mike Nesmith, I think. He had red hair and he was kind of tall and very talented. And he more or less said, well, I'm in a group. If you want 4 guys, then hire the 4 of us, But they had their own ideas, probably. Luckily, I mean,
Right.
I can't imagine my life as a Monkee,
Well,
maybe next lifetime.
Well, we all get that choice, right? We just keep recycling. I think that's how so many people believe that they're Cleopatra or Napoleon. I think when we empty this shell, why don't we step back in and I can find out what it's like to be Davy Jones' next lifestyle, right?
You never know. You never know what. Yeah.
Well, listen,
you would be a good Davy Jones.
yeah.
Dave.
I was. That is my other tie to it. My mom named me David after David Jones. My grandmother tried to get her to name me Dwight David after Eisenhower, and my mom, to placate her, said, well, how about just David? And so my grandmother always thought it had to do with Eisenhower. My mom had it after Davy Jones. So
that's
very
great.
cool. Yeah, I was born in '67, and that was the name I was connected with. Now, as I said, music is an all-encompassing field, and it does remarkable things for bringing people together. New friends reveal themselves. Yeah. And a few years back, probably think about 6-7 years ago, I was we were at a casino performing and doing some things, and I was introduced to an amazing band and struck up a friendship with one of the lead singers from this band, and we had just such a great connection. We've kept in touch, and he has written music for Darkness Radio and Midnight in the Desert and things that I've done my programs all along. And it seems like every step we take, we find out another deeper connection of fans of Duran Duran and the Monkees. And he's going to join us now. Jay Giuliano from Slamabama is on with us.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Jay. Great to have you here.
Oh, it's great. I've been great just sitting backstage to listen to the stories. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. Now, another good friend of mine who is a very recent friend, Dan Eckhart, who is one of the fabulous Eckharts. He is a paranormalist. He does seances with his wife. He is a font of unbelievable knowledge when it comes to my world, the supernatural and the paranormal. And after Mike passed away, I noticed that he started posting and talking about some of these things, and we reached out and connected on yet another level, which that's what I love about music. Dan Eckhart on the show with us as well. Hey, Dan.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And so here's our youngest contingent. This young fella, although he looks like he is dressed from the 1930s, he is our youngest fan base on here. And what I thought was great is he's not just one of those late coming Monkee fans, because when we started chatting, I was expecting to be like, yeah, Daydream, believer in it. No, he went deep into cuts and his favorite. What's your favorite album out of the entire grouping?
Well, it's tough. I think Head is their best record as an art piece, but my personal favorite will probably always be The Monkees Present. It blew my mind when I first heard it. My dad had one of those Artista 76 re-releases of the Monkees' greatest hits. And the thing that really, I liked all the songs on it, but the one that totally was like, what is this? I need more of this, was Listen to the Band, which was, of course, featured on the Monkees Present. And that was a hard record to find because they hadn't started, I missed the 80s re-releases, and I was too early for the box sets and the iTunes thing. So I had to dig through crates of records, and I happened upon the Monkees Present. I was like, "There's 3 of them. Where's the 4th? What's going on here?" And then to put it on was like, "Oh wow, there's country, and there's this jazz infusion, and there's this this kind of harder edge to them that I'd never heard before." So it became the moment of realizing there's something under the hood. It's not just music I like. There's something happening underneath here, and I need to find out what that is.
Jay, what's your favorite of the Monkees albums?
You know, I'm a Headquarters guy. I've always loved Headquarters. I love the rawness of it. You know, obviously I love the turning point in the career of the guys that surrounded it and everything else. I love the guys taking control a bit of their music as they did around that particular time. You know, it's funny. I'm with him on Present too. I love that album. And I also love Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, Jones. That's another one of my favorites. I like a lot of them, but there's something about that kind of just, I don't know, that cool, rough garage band sound of Headquarters that I've always really, really enjoyed. It just feels like those guys just went at it and they were like, let's just do this thing. And it's a rock album. It's a really cool rock album. So yeah.
Now, Henry, you were there in studio while they were cutting these. And right now there's this great Disney Plus feature, the Get Back sessions with the Beatles. And what's been so fascinating to me is watching the Beatles in studio creating what would become classics. Now, of course, the Monkees did it differently because they were given songs, tracks had been created for them, and they had to go in. But what was it like to be there and watch kind of the magic of these guys working together and the music coming out?
Well, I was at a lot of recording sessions taking photos. And also because once Chip took over as producer, I mean, he was my pal. We sang together for 5 years. So he would always have me come in and just hang out. And occasionally I would go play tambourine on a song. I remember I was on one thing. We did a little station break. We'll be back in a minute, back in a minute. And that was me and Mickey singing. So I got to participate. But, my memories of the Monkees were more on the TV set because I would go down there every morning and spend the whole day on the set with these guys. And, the filming probably took about maybe a quarter of the day. And the rest of the time they were setting up lights or was lunch break or whatever. We had lots of downtime to explore around, especially when we shot outside at the Columbia Ranch and there was the whole Western Street, and you could explore behind those buildings. And it was just so much fun. I think I probably hung out with Mickey the most. Mickey was my neighbor in Laurel Canyon, and he was the guy I was closest to, although, I knew them all really well. But we just had so much fun exploring and looking for adventure, on the set. And so, yeah, I mean, in the recording studio, yeah, that was fun to watch. A lot of it is, okay, now you go in and put the bass part out, or you go in and sing that part or that. It's a little bit piecemeal. I mean, you don't walk in and see all four Monkees singing song after song together at the microphone. It's kind of done a part at a time, So anyway, that's my take on it. Can't hear you. We can't.
When you look back at that now, though, and you hear the songs and you see how huge they are, when you were there in the studio hearing them, did you have any concept of, oh my God, that's a hit?
Well, Daydream Believer, for sure.
Right, sure.
That one, yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's funny listening to you guys talk because the Monkees to you were these records that you would listen to. The music, of course, the show, but a lot of it was me. It's funny. I don't know why, being a musician, I didn't really listen to a lot of records. I mean, I didn't sit there and play album after album, on the floor at the hi-fi, I just didn't. I mean, you would hear it all day long on the radio.
You weren't down stomping at the hop, dancing with the kids?
I mean, I guess I was making the music rather than sitting there and listening to it so much.
You were too busy.
Doing other things. I mean,
to put anybody down.
Personally, I love I love world music. I like bouzouki, belly dance music, Middle Eastern music. One of my favorite forms of music is African pygmy music. They chant these little chants, imitating the forest creatures. And it's so hypnotic and so beautiful. And I love jazz. I love country music. I love right across the board, just music. But the Monkees were a big part of my life for quite a number of years. I went on the road with them and hung out with them, on the weekends and almost every day for a number of years.
Unbelievable. Yeah, you're right. It's an interesting perspective, right? Because as fans, we have one view of the Monkees as somebody who is a friend and an artist of your own, dealing in that realm, watching the music and show come together and seeing through the eye of the lens of your camera, capturing for eternity these golden moments. You've got a totally different perspective on the entire history of this. Is it surprising to you that here we are talking 55 years later about this band?
No, not at all. I mean, when there's, four young, kind of good-looking guys and they're on the TV every week for all the little teeny boppers to watch, and there's great music. I mean, how often does that happen? Not very often. It happened for the Partridge Family and David Cassidy, and it happened for the Monkees. That's a killer combination of releasing hit songs and having a weekly TV show. But, remember, for me, it was more the visual side. I mean, I was there taking pictures for Tiger Beat magazine and 16 magazine. And so I knew what they wanted. They wanted those cover shots or those posters that girls would put up on their bedroom wall. So I would sit there with my camera while they were doing their acting, and I would wait. I would be focused on Davy with the telephoto lens. And when he would turn and laugh, I would go click, and I would get that picture. So I was sitting there watching through the lens, just waiting for the right expression. And then, God, got it. A lot of those big, those headshots.
Yeah. Well, obviously, in order to become more famous, I need to wear beaded necklaces and take my shirt off and have Henry Diltz photograph me. What do you think, Henry?
Yeah.
Are you ready to capture all this?
Oh, yeah. Those monkey love beads. One day up in Laurel Canyon, I mean, all the hippies were wearing love beads. I mean, and little girls would make them. The little girls would usually just put all different colors together, a multicolored thing. And I thought, well, I'm a Virgo. I'm kind of, analytical, and I said, I'm going to make my own beads. And they were blue and white, light blue and light and white. But at the very end, I put one red one. So that was the only, other color on. And I wore them down to the Monkee set. And the first day I wore them, Davey said, "Hey, man, could you make me some of those?" Next day I brought them back. And then the camera said, "Henry, would you make me some of those beads you made Davey?" And I made him some. And pretty soon the girls from the magazine saw everybody wearing these blue and white beads. And then magazines started selling, string them yourself, a little package of beads, monkey love beads.
And that's how you made your millions, right? Licensing.
Yeah, no, not at all. But those were my Laurel Canyon Virgo love beads. But I was happy to see everyone wear them.
Well, no pressure, but I do recall in 1984, Henry, you promising to make me my own Monkees necklace. You said you still had the beads. And I'm not one to press anybody, as obvious it's been 40 years. But when you're ready, I'll be ready for my love bead necklace. Now, check it out, Jay, Dan, you guys will get a kick out of this. That's not the only really famous love bead necklace you made, is it, Henry? Isn't there another famous 60s icon that...
Yes, Gloria Stavers was the editor of 16 magazine. And she saw all these beads, and she knew I made them. She said, "Henry, could you make me a special pair of love beads for a friend of mine? He's spiritual, he's earthy, he has a dark side." And that's all she said. And I thought, okay, earthy, I'll make brown and green. And for spiritual, I put a little white in there. And for the dark side, I'll put a black bead in there once in a while. And I gave them to her. She didn't tell me who they were for. And about a year later, I saw those famous pictures of Jim Morrison with his shirt off, wearing the beads I made for Gloria Stavers.
Wow.
So
that's pretty incredible.
For those of you that don't know what the hell we're talking about, let me see. I think I just saved it to my desktop so we can share this famous image. There you go.
There they are.
That's
there
crazy.
They are. See, they're brown with a black at each end, and then it's white with a green one right in the middle. And many of the pictures were black and white like that. There were a few color ones, not too many. Most people saw them this way. And one time I met a Monkee fan club, at an art gallery, and 5 or 6 women from Arizona came in wearing these turquoise and yellow love beads. I said, what are those? They said, well, these are Jim's love beads. I said, really? Where did you get those colors? Well, we don't know what color, but we think these would be the colors he would want, you know. So funny.
Hey, Dave, should we answer this question?
Yep. Eddie Ladiak wants to know, how many songs did the Monkees really write that became a hit?
Well, there's 2 that I'm aware of, and that would be "The Girl That I Knew Somewhere," which was the B-side to "A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You," and the other song would be "Listen to the Band," which charted fairly well across the country. Those are the only 2 that I can think
All right,
of.
let's ask Dan and Jay here, our Monkee fans. "A Little Bit Me, A Little Bit You." I want your first one hand up. Who wrote that song? Jay, who was it?
Neil Diamond.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Dan, you just lost a little bit of credit.
No.
I'm more of a Nesmith fan. I think that's the quality of material that the Monkees put out is shocking. It is great. I agree with Peter Tork. They have probably the 3rd best songbook in the 60s band releases. But I think Nesmith doesn't get enough credit as an American songwriter and someone who contributed to the American canon of songs.
Actually, could I interrupt real quick about that, on that subject, and how right you are about that? Well, you know, you were talking earlier, Dave, about your daughter, I think, and you, and how you may have a disconnect on the Monkees, and maybe you're a big fan, and maybe she's not as big a fan as you are. And that applies to Rosanna and I, my wife, who, you know, she and I are both singers in the band, and she loves all kinds of music. I love all kinds of music. We didn't really connect rather on the Monkees thing. I was just a big fan, and she just was not, you know, and it wasn't because she didn't like him or anything, just never really got turned on to him. And, you know, she knows some of the songs. She loves Daydream Believer and the songs that, you know, you can't help but love. But we were able to connect when I first convinced her that Mike Nesmith was something special, was because he had written Different Drum. And she was such a big fan. When I told her that he had written that song for Linda Ronstadt, that's where we first found our first connection on just how great Mike was. And that really meant, like, because when we first started singing together, You're No Good, I think, was the first song that she and I ever sang together, because she's a big Linda fan. So we had done that song at the first couple of rehearsals, and I was like, well, you know, you like Linda, you know, maybe you'd like the Monkees if you knew that, you know, Mike Nesmith wrote that song. And so it was a cool connection there. And you're so right about that. It was his songwriting that, you know, was able to cross over to people like that, you know, just in writing those kind of songs well beyond the Monkees years was, I mean, yeah, hell of a writer.
I love the fact too that the Monkees music matured with me at different stages, right? Obviously, well, not obviously, maybe other people were affected differently. Mickey was kind of my guy growing up. He sang the songs I appreciated most. And I got to be honest, when I get to a Davy Jones song, The Day We Fall in Love, and these languishing love, I was like, oh Christ. And I would just
your eyes didn't sparkle?
No, I would lift the needle and put it down. And I could tell you, I've listened to those albums so many times. You could look at them and you could tell which track Davy Jones sang, because it was pristine and black, and everything else was grayed out from listening to it. And then as I got older, I really began to appreciate the voice of Davy and the songs. And although there were a couple of clunkers, and The Day We Fall in Love will forever be my least favorite song in history, but the music on there and what each one brings to it, I absolutely love. And then when you get even to the Pool It album, Peter's songs are genius on the Pool It album. I love the music and the way Peter goes. And it wasn't just the Ringo Starr one-off Looney Tunes, you know, that you get on each album with the Beatles. I really loved what Peter started bringing. And again, you brought up Head, Dan. Mm-hmm. That is one of the best songs ever, right? And to hear Peter really kind of in that George Harrison zone, and I hate to even call it that, but that's what everybody kind of associates it with, was the Maharishi and that whole kind of head trip moment. But man, that guy nailed it.
That's why I always point people towards latter era Monkees albums, because like you're talking about Davy Jones, and yeah, The Day We Fall in Love is not a great song by any means. It's on More of the Monkees, and it is a clunker. But by the time you hit instant replay, Davy Jones is on You and I with Neil Young backing. Like, how can you get any cooler than that? And he has a voice which really carries. Man
I
Without
love
a
Daddy's
Dream.
song. Daddy's song on Head is one of
Yes.
one of my favorite songs on the album, actually.
Oh yeah. So there's a lot of undiscovered gems like lurking in the back. And now that we've kind of exhumed that through Andrew's work and Gary's work and seen what was not released but could have been, there's even better stuff hiding that was just in mothballs.
I will say too, I like Davy's Shades of Grey over Peter's Shades of Grey. And I don't love Peter's. There was something just really wholesome and heartfelt in Davy's vocal on that song. So yeah.
Trisha Irvin says her favorite song on Headquarters has always been Shades of Grey. That is one that stands alone.
I see that.
My daughter, Jennifer, it was the daughter of Karen and I, she just contacted me yesterday when we were shooting the breeze for a few minutes, and she goes, Dad, I got to tell you something. You know, I never liked the Monkees. Karen tried to introduce me to it. I just never got into it. And she goes, but I really sat down and listened to Last Train to Clarksville. And my God, what a great song. It's so much more than just a pop song. There was something to it. And she still didn't realize the backstory. And if I'm wrong, Gary, correct me, but it's basically a guy heading off to Vietnam. Is that the correct story, or has that been bastardized?
No, it's an anti-war song, but carefully disguised, obviously, because this is the Monkees, and you don't want them to have a political song as their first record. But it was definitely influenced by the Beatles. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's Bobby Hart has told that story.
Right, Paperback Writer, isn't that the song? Right.
He thought he was hearing on the radio, "Take the Last Train." He was hearing the fade out, I think, in his driveway up on Woodrow Wilson Drive in Laurel Canyon, and it's amazing. I just want to quickly say that Mickey Dolenz had a #1 song that he wrote in England, alternate title, but it was called When Scouts Get Here. And then Davy Jones had a #1 song in the Philippines, Hard to Believe.
Okay, right.
So they did have they were international stars. They were all over the planet. I mean, it was just an amazing.
Now,
they were universal.
For the 8 Monkees fans out there that don't know the story, Randy Scousgett, why is it called alternate title in the United States?
Well, because it had a sort of a nasty.
Right. Randy Scousgett means you're kind of a horny asshole, right?
Yeah, no. It's as Mickey says, a liver puddling, horny liver puddling putz, I think.
Yeah.
Is the latest version. But yeah, it was from that TV show Till Death Do Us Part, and that became All in the Family here. So you kind of get an idea that there was some controversial stuff from that show that was in England. But Mickey saw that on his first trip to England. He saw that TV show. And then he wrote about his whole story of visiting England for the first time. That's where he met Samantha on Top of the Pops, his first wife.
Now, we did call this a memorial, and Davy, Peter, and Mike were really focused on the artwork for this because, of course, they've moved into the next room and are no longer with us. And I really do like that take, Henry. I know you talked to us about that when I was on Coast to Coast.
Swami Satchidananda said that.
Yeah.
The lovely guru, the one who was at Woodstock and had everyone do a morning exercise. And he's one of the gurus I read. And he said, when you leave the planet, it's no big deal. You just walk into the next room. And I thought, great,
Yeah.
Can't wait to get there.
Less finality and more, I'll see you in a bit, right?
Yeah, and it's supposed to be better over there.
God, it can't be worse. Let's just, as the Beatles would say, right? Dan, I know you've got to get going in a few minutes, so let me ask you, if I had to put the screws to you right now, top 3 songs for you, Monkees wise.
Ooh, yeah, I would have to say, Listen to the Band is up there. It's a sonic journey. Porpoise Song, of course, you can't really do much better than the Porpoise Song. And I'd have to say Steam Engine gets a lot of play, even though it wasn't released in the original run, but was released later as a fan club single. It was recorded with Chip Douglas, I believe. And they wanted.
Do you have that single by any chance, Dan?
I don't have the actual single, but I have like a million different takes of it thanks to the Monkees Present box set.
I know this guy who helped put together the artwork for that single. Gary Strobel, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I remember when you were so excited about that. And what was it? Chip had just uncovered that song in one of his files.
He found a tape of one of the takes, and we decided. And then the flip side was what? Rainbows. I think it was Rainbows, a Davy song. And it's actually Jerry Yester's on that record, and this was probably after the Monkees were starting to fall apart, and we decided to release it as a fan club thing. There was another one that Chip was involved in called Christmas Is My Time of Year, which featured 3 of the Monkees on that track. And, but yeah, we did the picture sleeve, and it was, I might have an extra copy or a few. I'll have to look through the archives if you want an original for your collection.
Let's get in touch.
Yeah. And I think it's signed by Chip and I don't know who else. Anyway, I did. That's my background is graphic arts.
Incredible.
So that's what I went to school for.
So those will be your 3, and I agree. Those are great tunes. What if you had to pick the quintessential Monkees episode to introduce a fan to the series? What would your favorite?
The Frodo's Caper. I would go with him on that. Absolutely.
It's the wit, it's the improvisation, it's the music. You get Zora and Zam, and an early version with some like nicer guitars. Even though the album cut is great, there's something very. They've refined it. They knew at that period, and it wasn't like a season 2 episode where they were kind of listless or like, oh man, we're over this. There was energy there. Plus, opens with a Beatles song.
That's right.
Very cool.
Henry has a story about Frodo. I mean, there's,
Frodo's. Well, virtually every one of my friends, I have a photo gallery called Morrison Hotel Gallery. And now we have a lot of photographers. When it first started, the first couple of years, only my photos. And I was standing there one day and a guy walked in and looked around the whole room, 100 photos of mine. He said, "Did you ever smoke grass with any of these people in these photos?" And I looked around the room and I said, every single one of them. Because that, you just did that. It's, God's herb. You have a little bit and it kind of makes things bright, and you want to pick up your guitar and play. It kind of stops the you stop the tapes. They call them monkey tapes. It's funny. Stops all that stuff, gee, what am I going to do? What if this happens? What if that happens? I mean, your mind is churning away. You smoke a little of this flower and you relax and you smile and you kind of be happy. Well, Mickey named it Frodus, and the little girls would say, "Hey, Frodus rules," and they didn't know they were talking about an illegal, shouldn't have been illegal, and it's almost not now, but it's God's herb, and it cures so many things these days that it is God's herb. And that's what Frodus is. That's Mickey's name.
I like it. Dan, before you head out, are there any other points of interest, any other anecdotes you'd like to share from your fascination and love of the Monkees and Mike Nesmith?
Yeah, and I was happy that you asked me to be a part of this because, as you said in the beginning, I'm into the paranormal. I'm a medium. And one of the things that very much directed my life was Mike Nesmith, was his commitment to the art that he was trying to create. And I remember as a kid going to the library, I was like 14, and trying to track down a copy of The Long Sandy Hairs of Neptune Zamora, which was his novel, and reading that and just being like, I later found he came from a Christian Science background, a very new thought, kind of if you think it, you can do it kind of philosophy. And that's been something that I've applied to my own career. It's been a thing that's consistently held me to, what are you trying to create? What do you want to put out into the world? And are you going to do it if no one shows up? Because in the 70s, Michael Nesmith's this talented guy releasing these incredible records, Magnetic South, Loose Salute, Nevada Fighter, incredible records. And they're selling very poorly. And he could have said, you know what, I'm going to pack it up and go home, or I'm going to sit down with a session guy and try and come up with a hit. And there was a doubling down and saying no, this is the music I'm creating. And if it resonates, it'll resonate. And if it doesn't, it won't. Fame and fortune is nice, and I'm sure he was wanting that too. But that artistic integrity always stuck with me, and it's something that I hope he knows has imparted to me.
It was great when I saw Mike Nesmith perform the first time. It was solo at the Cubby Bear, and Rhino had just released some of the old stuff and some of the new stuff albums, which were like a greatest hits and the compilation of some of his newer music. And it was great when he got up there. He goes, "Well, just so we can start on an even footing here, I'm about to play a bunch of music most of you do not know nor care about, but I'm going to do it anyway." And I just thought that was such a great way. And he goes, "And hopefully by the time you leave here, your thoughts will have changed on that." And he won the audience over just in charm and that wit and compassion for the audience. I know you want Monkee songs. And I think he kicked out one Monkee song throughout the entire evening, but the rest, he was just there for those two albums, and it was great to see him. Well, Dan, thank you for joining us. I appreciate you stopping in and spending some time with us. And give our best to your lovely wife, and good luck tonight in your search for the afterlife.
Thank you so much.
You got it, buddy.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Frotus Caper. Dan was a fan of that. I have to agree with Trisha Irvin on this. Peter Tork and the Devil episode is one of my favorite episodes of the Monkees. That's one I would recommend to anybody. I just thought it was so funny, poignant, empathetic. It was what I felt encapsulated their performances, their personalities so beautiful. When Mike stands up to the devil and strips him of the thought that you didn't give this ability and love of music to Peter. He's always had it in him. And I just thought that is what music is really about. And that, to me, Trish, I agree with you, is one of the best episodes of the Monkees series out there. Henry, did you ever actually sit down and watch the show, or were you just too busy out on the road?
I did. I wasn't like a true fan that, sat there right at that hour every week to watch it. No, it was fun to me to watch because I'd seen him film it for a whole week and then to see it put together. But I really watched it, 20 years later when my young son was born, Nick. He was born in 1985.
March 21st.
And I remember him, they were replaying. Remember MTV played 24 Hours of Monkees, and the Monkees had a big resurgence. And so little Nick, a couple of years old, was standing there in his little jammies with feet, and he had a little ukulele with the string around his neck. And he's standing right in front of the TV, just mesmerized watching the Monkees. I went, wow, what longevity,
When you watched it with Nick, were there moments? I can listen to music and mentally transport back to a moment when I heard that song, when I was in the car with my mom and we're singing along to a song together. When you were watching that with Nick, did it mentally bring you back into those moments of?
It did. But once again, it wasn't so much the song, but it was the visual. Because I say, oh, I remember when they did that. Oh, yeah, they came running in, and then this happened, and that. I remember watching them film that. Squatting there in the light stands. I would always hide in the light stands because when you're a still photographer on the set, if you ever happen to be in a shot accidentally, like you're standing in the wrong place, and the camera sees you, you're in a lot of trouble. Get him out of here. So I knew if I hid where the light stands were, they would never see me because they're never going to show any light stands. And I would sit there, like a tiger in the bushes with my telephoto, just trained on any one of the guys, whoever was, doing the bit, and just waiting for those moments. And so it was the visuals that I remember that day. I remember that whole thing more, more than the music. The music went right along with it. But I mean, look, I go to a Neil Young concert, right? I mean, years ago, and I'm shooting Neil Young, and people say, wow, you went to that concert? What did he play? And I go, well, I don't know. We played all those Neil Young songs, but I was watching, I wasn't cataloging what the songs were. I was busy with the visual part of it. They do go together, but I'm concentrating on the more of a watcher than a listener, I guess.
Right. Gary, I've got to know, out of all the Monkees Pantheon of TV series episodes, I know there's not many. What is it, 56 total episodes?
58.
58.
Davey used to say 56. He would never change that. But there were 58 episodes.
What is your favorite standout episode? And I'll tell you what, even though I like that Monkees logo, I'm going to take it down for now because you look like a unicorn. It just keeps popping up right on your forehead. There we go.
Logo on his forehead.
I just see that Monkees guitar sticking off your forehead.
I know. Yeah.
I didn't even notice that. But well, one of my favorite episodes, there's a couple of them, but the Christmas show.
Yeah.
The Christmas show, I'm old enough to have seen it the first time it was shown, and it was shown on Christmas night, December 25th, 1967. And the cool thing about it is when all those people came out at the end of the show, and they did the song Ryu Shiu, which is a song that Chip Douglas and Henry and Jerry Yester and Cyrus Faryar, the MFQ, were doing in their shows for since 60
years.
Yeah, and I think they learned it from the Kingston Trio.
Right.
But they did that song live, a cappella, and then all these people came out. And the cool thing was, because the Monkees used their own names, I felt like I spent Christmas with the Monkees. And I mean, I just remember, oh my God. And because they used their own names, when I would buy I could only afford one magazine, Tiger Beat, because it was cooler. It had a real photo on the cover, and 16 had like cartoon stuff. So in those magazines, they showed these guys with their real names, and here's Christmas with Mickey Dolenz. And I'm thinking, vicariously, I think I was friends with them back when it first started on television. So the Christmas show, and then I think the one with Davy where he has to go back to England. What is the title of that one?
Right, where his grandfather comes to
when his grandfather came to get him. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then the Devil and Peter Tork.
That's what we just talked about. Yeah, it's more than just a romp and a comedy. Although the Paris episode is such an awesome episode that there's barely any dialogue, if any, and it's just that really is a great standout.
And Monkees on Tour, that was breakthrough for television to have capturing an actual live concert and what goes on in the radio station. Going to that radio station, they used to tie up the disc jockeys. That was one of their things.
See, one of my favorites was it Everywhere a Chic Chic?
Yes.
I always call it here a chic, there a chic, but it's Everywhere a Chic Chic because there were all these harem girls on the set all week, all dressed in this lacy things.
Yeah, he's got lots of photos. I've scanned all the stuff, the non-monkey stuff.
Right.
Yes.
Pretty girls to photograph.
Yeah.
That was fun.
What a tough job you had there, Henry.
Yeah. I never realized until Gary just said, I never really realized that the obvious thing, they used their own names. I mean, like David Cassidy was Keith Partridge, right? He was. That's profound. Yeah.
Well, and it's a great lead in. We'll share this next little video clip. I was lucky enough a few years back. I was working with Wizard World, the big conventions, and they were here in Minnesota, and I was there doing some paranormal talks, and I was moderating a few of the panels, and the guy running it said, "Dave, by any chance, are you familiar with the Monkees?" And I'm like, "Am I familiar with the Monkees?" And I go, "I certainly am." Why? And he goes, "I don't have a moderator for Peter and Mickey. Would you moderate this panel discussion?" And here's a clip. I asked them about using their names. So let's go ahead and we'll give that a quick listen.
I've heard in different interviews it kind of asked it, but do you regret that on the Monkees you played Peter Tork and you played Mickey Dolenz? Do you wish you would have had character names instead?
That's a great question. That's been debatable for You've been on both sides of that question. Yeah, I've heard you at both times. I've heard you bemoan the fact that you had to play a character named Mickey Dolenz, and I've heard you say, "Well, that's what it was." Roy Rogers. It's a little bit of a moot point. A lot of acts did do it. It's a little bit of a moot point because it went by, it's happened, and it's over. But I have often wondered what would it have been different if we'd have had character names. I don't know if the producers ever considered it one way or the other. I just remember that one day they said, because I still have the original pilot script that we read from for the audition, and it's spelled Monkees without the two E's, until somebody in the legal department must have said, you can't do that or you'll never be able to trademark it or copyright it. So they changed this, but the original pilot script I have still, it says Monkees spelled E-Y-S, and the characters are, I don't know, Jim, Biff, Bingo, and Charlie or something. I don't even remember, but obviously not our names. So at some point, somebody in the organization, the powers that be up there, must have decided that they wanted to use our real names. I don't know why or how. I never heard a reason for that. But
So let's ask the man that knows all, Gary Strobel. First of all, what were the real names? Do you remember what the names were listed on the original?
The original script, it was Rick, S.J., and Wendell, and Davy. So that sort of confirms that the script was a vehicle by Paul Mazursky and Larry Tucker, a vehicle for Davy Jones or David Jones at that time. And I'm guessing, I've asked that question. I think Bob Rafelson had a lot to do with making that decision. But even when the show was about to premiere, some of the early ads say Mickey Braddock, M-I-C-K-E-Y, Braddock. That's the name he used on Circus Boy. And then it said Wool Hat Nesmith. So, and you're wearing the wool hat. So, so that choice of them using their own names, I think that turned out to be, I mean, think about it. Star Trek, Leonard Nimoy was Spock.
Yes.
But when you've
been hanging out with Mickey too long.
Yeah.
I'm starting to hear the story. I know this cycle.
Yeah. So anyway, what was the question?
So why? I was just wondering if you knew why they were stuck with those names.
I think it was trying to figure out whether they should be characters or I think because of the records that they were going to make, and they were hoping that they would go on tour. Then to have the character names, then it's like, well, how do you differentiate between the TV show and the live performance?
I wondered if that was it. That makes so much sense, because I think obviously the long game was for those guys to be rock stars, to be pop stars, and it would have been hard to have them go out and not be themselves and be a part of that whole,
Wendell and CJ.
Wendell and CJ.
SJ.
Oh, SJ.
Yeah.
What does that stand for?
I don't know.
Gosh.
I don't know.
Wow.
Crazy stuff. Now, I do want to point out as well, folks, this is also a celebration because today marks the birthday of Mike and Davey, forever in our hearts. This was online, and that said it was shareable, so I put it up. That is your Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Jones Limited. I thought that was such a brilliant album cover. I love that album. I love the cover. I love everything about it. But I don't think it was till the 90s I realized that it was because they both shared the same birthday, so they couldn't have Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, and Capricorn, right? It had to be a bit of a change up.
Yeah, and that was the issue. Was it wasn't going to fit on the album cover after they figured out what it was going to, the design, it would not have worked. So they came up with that. I think Chip may have had something to do with that.
Who was the Aquarius?
Wasn't that Peter?
Was it?
I don't know the signs. Pisces is what, the fish?
Yeah, yes. Pisces is Mickey.
Yep.
For sure.
So Aquarius is Peter's
Peter.
February, and December is Capricorn, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Hey, we just saw
December, January.
Look at that. Solving crimes. I love this. Again, great little picture of our birthday boys that Gary provided.
Yeah. I did.
took that. Yeah.
Who took that photograph,
I
Henry?
did. I
Oh,
think
you
I
did.
did.
Yeah.
And that was
among a few others.
that was during they were filming a couple of music videos. The video is the wrong term. They were just music films, and that was Star Collector. So you can see a little bit of the that Mickey had a thing called a Colortron or something that you would play music and all the lights would respond to the sounds of the music. And prior to doing this video or this film, they did Daily Nightly, where Mickey is playing one of the first ever or third ever built Moog synthesizers.
Yeah.
Which is just a remarkable song as well.
Yeah, it is.
Michael Nesmith.
I always thought it was interesting that Star Collector is really kind of a scandalous song for a bunch of bubblegum rock stars on a TV show, isn't it? Talking about basically groupies and a groupie that was having sex with everybody he knew.
Yeah, that slipped by the censors. Several the Monkees were really good, or Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider were really good at sneaking in some stuff that, because it was such a fast-paced show and colorful and quick edits, you couldn't lock into some of it because it was really zany. So they slipped in. If you watch those, like I didn't know that as a kid, and then as you watch them, you think, well, how did they get away with that at that point in time? I mean,
Don, we now are gay apparel, right? The little snips that they snuck in there.
And Frodis.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, the Frodis caper. I mean, Rip
and all the smoke and everything.
Rip Taylor was, oh my gosh.
That it is such a great contextualized, layered program. And Jay, is that part of what drew you to the Monkees music? Is that it was at one thing, it's a bubblegum fun pop music, and another layer, it's something totally adult and different.
Well, you and I have had a lot of conversations about a lot of bands, and three in particular that always seem to come to the top of our conversations: the Monkees, Duran Duran, and George Michael. And it's funny because I just love him as a vocalist. I think he's freaking amazing, and obviously you and I feel the same way about that. I'm a pop guy. I work in a studio. I appreciate the concept of pop music. I love it. And so when I was a little kid, and when the Monkees MTV fanaticism exploded, I was right at the perfect age for it when that happened. So in fact, I've got my 87 tour book right here that I brought with me today from that. And when I saw the first episode, that I remember seeing you were talking about seeing it on one network, I think, out of which network did you say Dave, that you were seeing?
WFLD TV, channel 32 in Chicago. That was our place for them.
I remember seeing it when I was a little kid on WOR out of New York. I feel like I saw it, we used to get that in Birmingham, Alabama. We would get WOR, WGN, and TBS, back in the day. Those are I think it was our only cable stations that we got. I feel like WOR, if I remember, was where I first saw it. And I just remember it being really super colorful and really super cool. And I was really young at the time. But then when the whole MTV thing happened, it didn't take a second. I was 100% in. First of all, I will say too, just like you, I was a Mickey guy from day one. I thought Mickey was the coolest guy. He was the drummer. He was so awesome. Even though I'm a guitar player myself, I was playing drums at the time, and I started as a drummer, and I loved his singing and playing. I thought that was so cool. I, like most people, matured into a big Mike fan. I think that kind of happens, when you start growing up a little bit, listen to their music. But I did start as a huge Mickey fan at the beginning. But I think just the concept of what I have to say, what Henry said earlier, and I want to make sure that I revisit this, because this was from way back when we first started talking. It's really cool that we could sit here today and talk about this band, and this band of four guys that never met, never knew each other, and was put together strictly for the age of television, the golden age of late 60s TV. And we're sitting here talking about a band and songwriting and musicianship. That's kind of the coolest thing ever. So there was something definitely there, that I think a lot of us were drawn in by the same thing, which is just good music and the ability of those guys to be themselves, but be their character. All this stuff we talked about, it's so broad, it's so unique to them. You just can't help but, you couldn't help but love it. just couldn't help but love it.
Agreed. 100%.
Well
Henry,
said. Well said.
very
Okay.
well said. Henry, I do have to make a quick mention because 3 of my oldest and sweetest friends are watching right now. We had bought tickets to go see the Monkees in the 80s together, and we went and we had tickets to go see the final concert in Chicago. Unfortunately, I was filming a new TV show and couldn't make it, but they went and had a great time, and they're all popped on watching, and they're all saying, "It's Uncle Henry," and wanted me to send you their best. You have given such great memories to a lot of us that did the conventions through the years in the circuit, because you were so approachable, kind, loving, and it just you took all of us little teens under your arm and were so cool with us and patient. And I also want to acknowledge Dan Masnick, my friend who quickly put this graphic together from the original Pisces album cover. We did a little play on words, sometime in the morning, as we're all coming together for this groovy grief session, a Monkees Memorial podcast. But Henry, they're watching, and they wanted me to send the love to you, as well as my friends Dawn Marie and Dawn Reno as well, that wanted to say hi. Jay, I hope this isn't throwing you under the bus here.
No, it's okay.
You are a musician. You are a Monkees fan. I know you're a Mike fan. You got guitars around you. Could you play us a quick song, and then we'll go back to a little talking?
I would love to. I'm going to play, it's funny. I wore the wool hat, obviously, for a reason. I don't normally wear the wool hat. But,
I was hoping.
Yeah. I thought maybe if I'm going to sit here and I'm going to play one for you, I'm going to play my favorite.
Okay.
My favorite Mike song, which I think is a lot of people's favorite Mike song. Except I do love listening to the band as well, which is an awesome tune. And was it Dan? Was that his name?
Yes, Dan. Yeah.
Dan was 100% right on a lot of that Mike stuff. You could tell he's a big fan. He knew what he was talking about. But I'll kind of swing this a little bit like they did on the Mike and Mickey thing, and I'll just do a verse and chorus. I feel like it's apropos for this little moment here. So take my hand, I'll start my journey, free from all the helpless worry that besets a man when he's alone. For strength is mine when we're together, and with you I know I'll never have to thread the high road for the low. I have no more than I did before, but now I've got all that I need. For I love you and I know you love me. Yes, I know you and I know you love me.
Nicely done, sir.
Thank you so much. Oh, thank you.
I appreciate that. That is the song. I'm glad you picked it. That is the song I always think of whenever I hear that song, I think of my wife, and I just love everything about that song, and I love how it makes me think of her every time it gets played. So thank you for choosing that one.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And Slamabama, just so people know, Slamabama is an amazing band, guys, and they are much more than just country. They are out there playing. And I remember throwing you a curveball one day when I saw you in concert, and you're like, any requests? And I yelled, Purple Rain. And the last thing I expected was for you to launch into a beautiful rendition of Purple Rain. So
thank you.
It's an amazing show, an amazing band. How can people follow you, just so we keep that up?
Well, we're all over social media. Obviously, you got to be. We're Slamabama at Slamabama on Facebook, Slamabama Band on Instagram, and Slamabama.com. And it's SLAMABAMA, just like it sounds.
I've got. While I'm sitting here, I'm going to prepare another video clip, if you guys don't mind, because I've got some of these fun little bits that when I was asked to step in and be a part of the live Monkees panel, one of the things I thought was really great when we were up there is I just kind of had free reign to ask whatever I wanted. And this was a question that I had always been curious about. So I threw it to the guys, and this is what they had to share.
Are there any songs, and I know you guys had some of the top songwriters in the world behind you, are there any songs that the Monkees collectively pass on and say, nah, that we don't like that song, or we don't want that song, that went on to just blow the roof off for some other band?
Well, personally, I about the song that you do on your own. You're going to tell them about the song that you do on your own album. Which one? Sugar. Oh, yeah, that's one. Yeah, I did that. I covered that years later. Yeah, I passed on The Diary by David Gates, and I was offered that. I was offered Old Fashioned Love Song, Paul Williams, and I just was lazy and didn't get around to it in time, and of course threw it out night. And Sugar Sugar, that was one we passed on. I was supposed to do a version of that, and that was when we were fighting for the control of the music. And it was a great song, but you know, what was going on at the time and Mike and stuff, we said no, I passed on that. And I also was offered, Is That All There Is? You know, Peggy Lee? But no, well, she eventually did it. I was offered it first. Wow. And I listened to it, the demo, I can't remember who wrote it. I listened to the little demo, you know, and I'm like 22 years old. And I'm like, how do you sing, Is That All There Is? I mean, I didn't have enough, I'm only out of diapers, you know, for a few years. And so, and I thought, I can't, I have enough life experience to sing this, but I was offered that.
Good.
To get out of that video. Yeah, I thought that was a fun one. And you guys will get a kick out of this. When they asked me, they quickly put up the wrong sign for this panel discussion. And but I got a great kick out of it. Sadly, this was right after Davy Jones had stepped into the other room. This was a few years after. And when they asked me to be up there, they had announced that David, Mickey, and Peter were going to be in the main room. And so I've got this nice little graphic. It's the wrong Davy, Mickey, and Peter, but damn it, I was billed with the Monkees. So I will accept it. I want to share some fun memories of doing the conventions and meeting the guys. Gary, one of our first cool connections was the fact that, and I think you'll get a kick out of this, Jay, I've had balls the size of footballs since I was very little. And
you should see a doctor about that.
Yeah, no, they work for me. When Gary was talking about, oh yeah, when the Monkees would visit radio stations, they would tie up the station guys and everything. So I literally, when that album, and you've got it behind you, Jay, can you grab it, your picture disc album?
Yes.
Grab that for us real quick.
Whoa, I can take my headphones with me.
When I saw this album, the reverse of this jumped out at me because WLS was my radio station growing up. And can you flip that album around real quick for us and put it up close? That photograph of the guys acting zany is at WLS in Chicago.
Chicago, yeah.
And I reached out to the big radio jock of the time, who was Larry Lujak. And as this little kid, I call Larry Lujak, a little kid, I was 14, right? I call Larry and I leave a message at WLS. My name is Dave Schrader. I'm writing for my high school paper, complete lie. And I said, and I want to do an interview with him about his meeting the Monkees. And I remember the day the phone rang, my mom picks it up. She's like, who can I tell him is calling? Yeah, that's what I thought. Hold on. Because Larry Lujak was one of the most famous broadcast voices in Chicago. And my mom goes, Dave, Larry Lujak's on the phone for you. And I came running in with my tape recorder and my little suction cup, and I put it on the back of my phone. And I did this interview with Larry Lujak, and he, you know, I was like, oh, what was it like? And he goes, they were kind of assholes and drove us nuts in the station, you know, and just, he was not as big a fan as I would have hoped, but he eased into it. And I got to tell you, Larry Lujak is one of the reasons I got into radio. He was very kind. He took other calls from me growing up, would answer my questions about radio. He and Roy Leonard. So that was a fun bit. Then Roy Leonard happened to be doing an interview with Mike Nesmith to promote the movie Time Rider, The Adventures of Lyle Swan, which was his first foray into producing big budget movies. So I had already connected with Roy Leonard. Roy had invited me into studio before to watch him do his shows. And I thought, I'm going to give it a shot. And I said, hey, I'm a huge fan of the Monkees. Is it possible to come? And he said, yeah. And maybe I can get you and your friends to sit in studio with us. So I called Gary and I'm like, hey, Gary, I just talked to Roy Leonard. And he said that if we want to come to the studio, we could probably sit in studio with Mike Nesmith. And Gary's like, when can I pick you up, Dave? Let's go. And we got there. Unfortunately, Mike and his people said no. They wouldn't allow it to happen, but he would come down and meet with us after the interview. And so Karen and myself and Gary and my mom let me skip school that day. We all met at WGN Studios, and we got a chance to meet Mike as he came down the stairs in his brown leather jacket, looking all sporty and 80s, and signed our autographs and stood there for pictures with us, and was just one of the nicest guys to come into contact with. And Gary, that was, you were like, Dave Schrader, you just introduced me to Mike Nesmith. How did this happen? Because this is a guy you've been going after for a while to try to meet, right?
That's right. That's right.
And we got this great opportunity, and he was so kind. And it just really turned into a neat deal. And you also got me out of school another day when you said, Dave, we got to go to Maryville, Indiana, because Davy Jones is going to be doing, what was it? Chicago Today.
Oh, the T9. Yeah. Chicago Today.
Yeah. With Rob Weller as the host. And it was Peter Noon, Mark Lindsay from Peter Noon from Herman's Hermits, Mark Lindsay from Paul Revere and the Raiders, and Davy Jones.
Yeah.
And we got to go see them at this big mall doing this big morning show. And I remember asking my dad, and my dad was a hard ass. You remember my dad. And what was so funny is I tell him, hey, can I skip school today? And he goes, no. And I go, I might get to meet Davy Jones from the Monkees. And he goes, you might? And I said, well, there's a pretty good chance. All right, you can go. Just like you let me skip to go meet Mike Nesmith. If it had something to do with music, my dad was so cool about that. But we went down there and watched that live broadcast. There's a really crap version on YouTube if you get a chance to watch it. But it wasn't Davy in like pink pants.
Yes.
And and very flashy 80s Miami Vice look to him. But it was a fun show, great times. And we just all had these interesting orbits where we kept meeting them. And I'll tell two other quick Davy Jones stories because he really connected with my heart as I got older. When we did the Monkees convention, and you said it was in '88 in California, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No. Well, the Chicago, when he met with your friend in the wheelchair.
No. I want to talk about it was in '88, I believe, in California, and it was at like the Hollywood Holiday Inn. And I happened to follow Davy, and I think it was Peter Noon. And Henry, maybe it was you. I just remember the long, beautiful blonde hair, and the two of you walking in. And as we walked in, all these people are like peering at Davy, and he goes over and sits down at the bar, and there's this table full of thick neck guys, and they're like, hey. And I turn around, I looked at him, and he goes, who's the little long hair? And I go, that's Davy Jones from the Monkees. And he goes, no shit. We'll go over there and tell him pro wrestler Dusty Rhodes wants to meet him. And I'm like, okay. So I walk over, and I'm like, any reason to get the chance to go up and talk to Davey? So I walk up and I go, excuse me, Mr. Jones. And he turns and gives me a big smile. And I said, pro wrestler Dusty Rhodes would like to meet you. And he looked, and again, it was either you or Peter Noon. And he said, well, let's go meet pro wrestler Dusty Rhodes. Was that you, Henry? Do you remember that or no?
No, I don't think it was me.
Okay, then it must have been, maybe it was Peter. But they got up and went, and I got to sit at the end of the table and watch pro wrestlers talking to musicians. And they, oh my God, got hammered out of their mind and laughed and told road stories. And it was so remarkable. To be the fly on the wall. And then my other favorite Davy memory, aside from my daughter getting to meet him, when she was about 10 or 11 at a little local concert. He was doing a benefit for a church here. And afterwards, a little group of girls snuck backstage, and my daughter snuck in with, and she got to meet him. That was sweet. And she comes out and she goes, Dad, he's so small and so cute. I want to hug him all the time. And she was his height, and she was like 10 years old.
Yeah.
But we went to Chicago Con, and I told my friend Gary, I said, Gary, my friend Tom Keating is coming with his sister, Susie, who has special needs, and she loves Davy Jones. And is there any chance you could help us introduce him? And Gary said, yeah, let me see what I can do. And he came up to me, he goes, you got to go up the back elevator. You're going to go up to like floor 10. You're going to go out in the hall. You're going to wait. And then the guard will come out and ask who you are and what you're there for. You tell him, and Davy's ready to meet with Susie. And I'm like, thank you. Now, Davy had an accident prior to this. He had been riding horses and thrown off his horse. And I think, had he dislocated his shoulder or just bruised it, Gary? Do you remember?
I think it was more serious. It was probably dislocated.
Yeah. So he had his arm in a sling, and we go up into the hall, and Gary is there, and I'm there, and Susan's there, and the guard comes out and he goes, "What can I do for you?" And we're supposed to meet with Davy Jones. No. And we're like, "No, yeah, we this is prearranged. He's going to meet with Susie." No. And we all just kind of stood there awkwardly like, "Oh crap, what do we do?" And all of a sudden the door opens and Davy Jones leans out and he goes, "Are you Susie?" And she goes, "Yeah." And he goes, "Why didn't you let me know?" And the guy's like, and he got all kind of panicky. So Davy walks out and sees Susie, and she's very kind of hunched up and everything. And he slides his arm out of his sling so that he looks like Davy Jones. He's there for her. He's in full Davy mode, beaming smile, fucking twinkles in his eyes and everything. He was on fire, and he's engaging and so sweet and loving to her as they're talking. And he goes, "What was your favorite song?" And she goes, "Well, I really liked when you sang to Marcia Brady." And Davy goes, "Yeah, I remember that." And he starts swaying and he starts singing the song from the Brady Bunch, right? And she goes, "No. And he stops and she goes, "You've got it wrong." And he goes, "I do." And then she sings it back to him. Do you remember that, Gary?
Yes.
Davy's eyes well up with tears. And he goes, "Susan, may I hug you?" And she said, "Of course, Davy Jones." And he hugged her. And oh shit, I think all of us in the hall, I'm getting misty thinking about it. We're all like, standing there hugging each other, watching this. He was such a gentle soul every time I came into contact with Davy through the years. And always serving of the fans. It was really amazing to watch this guy. And you had a lot of contact with him, Gary. I mean, he truly loved his fans, didn't he?
Absolutely. Well, and to add to that story, I videotaped that, and then we went down the hallway, got on the elevator, and we're in the elevator with Susan Cowsill.
Right.
And she, and she wants to know why Susie's upset. Right. And then Susan Cowsill shared her story about how she wanted to marry Davy Jones.
Right.
And that was just an incredible moment in all of our lives to witness the kindness of Davy Jones. And he was like that till he had to leave us. I mean, I had a younger brother who had special needs, and Davy Jones was so good to him. Called him on his birthday, June 21st, all the time. And one of the stories about Davy is that he would call my brother, and one particular time was June 21st, 1997, and the Monkees did a concert at Candlestick Park after the baseball game.
Mm-hmm.
And unbeknownst to me, that same day, later in that day, he flew down to Los Angeles and sang Daydream Believer with U2 at the LA Coliseum. Wow. And somehow Davy, in that craziness, found time to call my brother. Oh. So that's the type of person Davy Jones.
And we got a chance to meet Peter very early on. I think he was the first of the Monkees that we met. And you took me, was it to Ohio? We saw Peabody's Down Under, right?
That's right.
Some little seedy dive bar in Cleveland.
By a canal or something. We went with Cindy, Casper, and
who's listening tonight as well. Hi, Cindy. We love you and miss you. And
Chris Kendall, my friend from Cicero, Illinois, where I grew up.
And you guys were so sweating that I was not going to get in because I was like 15 years old. And you're like, I don't know. And you told my mom, they're like, if he can't get in, we still have to go in. That was my first bootleg concert because I had my tape recorder and I recorded the entire Peter Tork set. And then remember at the end, he came out and he's meeting people and they all started getting pushy and he ended up getting shoved. And he exploded and took off backstage. And then we went back out. We stood there and he came out like 5 minutes later, calmed down and apologized to everybody. And he said, there was too many people. I got shoved. I'm not good in a crowd. Apologized, took time with everybody. And then we went backstage. He was still physically shaken. Yeah. And I'm standing there holding a Tiger Beat. Yeah. And he looks at the cover of that and he goes, I remember that issue. And he goes, go to like middle of the book, and I open it up, and there's the spread, and he goes, and there's him as a little boy standing next to this giant dog, and he goes, I hated that fucking dog. And he just starts telling me these stories. He goes, he would slobber on me and lean on me, and so he's all prim and proper in this cute little boy, and he's standing next to this giant like mastiff, and it just looks so sweet until he tells me the story of, oh, I hated that dog. And it was, but Peter was also another very kind soul that just really seemed to get the fans at the conventions. They were great. Always had that time. Did you get a chance to see them much, Jay, when they were performing?
I only saw them live once, and sadly it was without Mike. It was on that, actually it was in 87. I went and saw them.
Oh, sure.
And Weird Al. Weird Al opened for him on that tour. And it was fantastic. I mean, it was a dream come true at the time, because I mean it was in the heat of all that MTV stuff. You know, as a musician myself, and being a musician since I was 21 years old, a working musician, I've missed so many shows, you know, that I would have loved to have seen, and I would have loved more than anything to have seen Mike with them. And you know, there wasn't long back that had a chance to see them, and I was in Denver at the time, and we couldn't do that Minnesota show, and I really wanted to go to that show badly. And now I really wish more than anything I had been able to attend that show. But you know, it's one of those things where, you know, doing it myself for a living, you know, even though I'm in a road band and we just kind of do what we do, it's, you know, you miss a lot of opportunities sometimes because you're working, you know, and concerts fall on the weekends a lot. But I did get to see them that one time when I was a kid, and obviously have watched a million hours of YouTube videos of them live since. But you know, no, I never got to see Mike, and that's very sad. But
it was, Gary, what was it like when their Justice tour? They only ended up going over to Europe, right? To do the tour of the four of them when the Justice album came out?
That's correct. Yes. And I remember the rehearsals. I went to the last day of rehearsals in Burbank, right near the Burbank airport. And I said to Michael in the parking lot, I said, "Oh, I'll see you in England." And he goes, "Why?" And you know, because he said, "I'm going to be doing the tour in the States, you know, after they do the British part of it." And I said, "Well, I've never been to England before, and I did my thesis on Stonehenge." And I said, "I want to see you guys, and I've never been to England, and I'm going to Stonehenge." And he says, "I look forward to seeing you in England." But at first it was kind of like, well, why are you wasting your time having to fly to England? But I'm glad I did. And then I documented, Davey wanted me to be there, and I documented the last 7 shows. And it was amazing to just see those 4 guys out there on that stage. Some of that stuff is on YouTube, but I have the master tape still, and I'm looking for a good audio because they basically did the same set. But oh my gosh, just to see them come out on stage, just the 4 of them, and play. They were this incredible garage band. They were a TV show about a band that became a band, and a very, very competent band. So
that's why I love that Headquarters album so much.
Exactly. Yes.
That's when you first saw the seeds of that coming through, and they were. That's, you know, I didn't want to use the term garage band earlier, but it's very true. That's exactly what it was. And I kept referring to it as this raw recording, this rock recording, but it really was that. And they blossomed from there, and it was incredible to watch.
Well, there's that great episode, One Man Shy, and Ronnie Farnsworth. You know, Peter's trying to get the girl, but he's too shy, and Ronnie Farnsworth says, "You guys are just 5th rate or 7th rate musicians, or 5th rate," and go and they said, "No, we're not. We're 3rd rate musicians." And I thought it's so symbolic when you break down those episodes. There's a lot of symbolism of what actually happened to those guys as this project took off, and nobody knew. You could put so much money into a project, there isn't any guarantee. But as Peter Tork described it, it was like lightning in a bottle. Or I think he said one time it was like a like when the sun hits a prism and it breaks it into all these colors, and there's a certain angle that when the sun hits the prism, that there's something magical happens. And that's what we've been experiencing for 55 years.
Well, I lived in a moment where the light hit the prism at a perfect angle.
Yeah.
Because I was in the room with world-renowned photographer Henry Diltz, with one of the sexiest girls in the 80s. And this man has photographed, oh my gosh, every major band you could imagine, from McCartney to Jim Morrison to the Monkees to Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And ladies and gentlemen, I can put myself amongst the crowd as I've got a professional photograph of me and Amy Dolenz.
Amy Dolenz.
Oh.
Amy Bluebell Dolenz.
That's right.
Lovely girl.
And there, I've got proof that I've been photographed by a world-renowned photographer.
There you go. Wow.
That's why I peaked early, Jay. My life peaked
No,
early.
that's okay. You know what? I actually had that same feeling a few minutes ago when I think I was in the middle of talking and I looked down and Henry was taking a picture of the screen, and I felt really honored. I felt honored to be in that photo.
Well. I document my days. You know?
I like that. I like that.
And he'll sell you a copy for $250.
Thank you, Henry. I appreciate that.
And if you want it signed, it's $1,100. I do want to mention, so that people can find you, you've got amazing photographs that are for sale from every known musician, it seems, under the sun. How do people find you, Henry, and how can they get some of your original art?
They go to the website for our gallery, and that is morrisonhotelgallery.com. And put my name in, because we have over 100 photographers we represent. But you'll see all my stuff there. I don't have my own website. I just sell the photos through the gallery. I'm one of the owners of the gallery. When we accidentally named it the Morrison Hotel Gallery, one day in New York, we had a little storefront. And I was standing across the street with my partner watching people walk by. And we had a big blow up of the Morrison Hotel album cover with the Doors in the window. And people would stop and they'd look at that picture and then they'd walk in the store. And I said, wow, it really is like a magnet. And I said, now look at that beautiful writing, Morrison Hotel, on that picture. And look at our window up above that. We got nothing. There was nothing on the window. And he said, what a great idea. I'm going to hire a painter tomorrow to write Morrison Hotel on our window, just, to draw attention to that photo. And so that just became the name of the gallery. We didn't say, well, let's name ourselves after the Doors album cover. I mean, it happened organically. But that's it, morrisonhotelgallery.com.
All right. Here's another very famous Henry Diltz photograph.
Oh, my gosh. Look at that.
Look at that. Who's that young buck with the dark hair and the devil-may-care denim jacket? Is that young Gary Strobel?
Yeah.
That's not you.
That's me.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
And,
My God.
And over my shoulder is Ward Sylvester, who discovered Davy on the stage when he was performing as the Artful Dodger. And then next to me is David Jones, and then Michael G. Bush, wonderful photographer from Chicago,
right.
and a good friend.
Another good friend. Yeah, that's wow.
And that was the TV special. So that was the ABC TV special, 1997.
Gary, I would never recognize you in that picture. That is so.
You're rocking that Canadian tuxedo.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Well, it was
Wow.
It was filmed in January, so.
There's the Gary that I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is J.C. Penney catalog Gary right here.
That's right.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. And right here, this is backstage hanging out.
No,
with
this is actually at the Burbank Marriott Hotel. He was at an autograph show, and this is February 12th, 2012. And sadly, 17 days later,
Wow.
he
Walked into the next room.
and he was. I have about 5 hours of that weekend because it was Saturday and Sunday. and he was so high energy and just you would never have guessed that he was about to have to leave us. And somebody brought a guitar and they wanted him to sign it, but he picked it up and he played a Tommy Boy song. I think it's called something, I Love New York City. I'm not sure the exact title, but there's a little bit of it on YouTube, but I have the whole song, but I don't know how to post anything. So I'm not on social media. I'm computer semi-illiterate.
You need to get a millennial. Gary.
Yeah, well, he's kind of millennial. If you go to Facebook, Henry has a thing called Henry Dilt's Photography, and he posts a photo every 3 days, maybe
every other day, 5 a week.
And then Henry will talk to his assistant Paige, and she will write it, and that's the story, and then people. Yeah, so check that out if you get a chance, and
Facebook and Instagram.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, talking about how the Monkees have affected us as fans is one thing, but Jody Rinson was supposed to join us tonight, and she had to bow out earlier for a family situation she had to deal with. But I had been stalking her pages and loving the stories and pictures she'd posted all along, and to know that we're not above, the Monkees are not above anybody having the same kind of fan reaction that we do. Here they are meeting Carrie Elwes from The Princess Bride and the Saw movies, and she said that they were at a convention, I believe it was, and Carrie saw them and came up and literally got physically emotional, telling them how much he loved them and that the music meant to him and his father, and that they listened to the music all the time. And it was very emotional. And what was sweet aspect of the story is as they left and walked away, Mickey turned to Mike and said, I recognize him, but I can't pinpoint who that is. And I think Jody's the one that told him, well, that's Carrie Elwes. And he's on there. Oh my gosh, Nez. Yeah, that's the guy from The Princess Bride and everything. And they had this great moment. And then he came over and introduced again a little bit later, but it was great to see that even the celebrities have these moments. And then one of the other funny stories is Mike Nesmith with John Cusack. And
oh my goodness.
Yeah. And in Jody's post, it says, here's the reunion long in the making. And they had this great conversation and great back and forth dialogue, and they exchanged phone numbers and they exchanged emails and they talked about new plans. And then when they parted, she goes, wow, Nez, that's amazing. Do you think you're going to work together again? And he looked at her, he said, no, he got kind of weird at the end. And that was the end of the conversation. So I love that.
So I just heard from Chip Douglas, and he said, you'll have to convey my greetings. I've had a tough day in town in the rain, doing many errands along with a couple of pitfalls.
Oh no.
Anyway, but he did respond. I texted him just to see if I could get him to join.
Very cool. Well, we appreciate it. Maybe this is something we can do again in the future to revisit and tell more fun stories and have a good time doing this. It's always a pleasure kind of when friends can connect and new friends and
maybe Jody will make it next time.
Yeah, that's the hopes. Now, gosh, Gary, you have been out there and have worked. It feels like almost like a personal assistant to each one of the Monkees at some point in helping them with things. And I remember when the Monkees had to pick their favorite episodes for MTV. Wasn't it Mike leaning on you? And was it Mike and Davey saying, I don't know which episodes to pick. Talk to us a little bit about that behind the scenes story.
Well, I gave them some choices. I mean, because a lot of them, Michael had not seen a lot of the shows in a long time. And I thought, well, The Devil and Peter Tork, that's just a really powerful episode. I mean, and he just did a fantastic job on that one. And then Davey, he was the heartthrob of all those. I mean, he got the girls in almost every episode. And so we had to kind of find something different. And I always think that, the one with Davey's grandfather is, and I love the one with Rosemarie, where they cheer her up, because she's now a widow, and they perform that song. To me, that was a really, that first season episode was really amazing. But it's interesting. I met Henry because of T-shirts. I designed T-shirts, and it was my way of saying thank you to the artist. And so, unbeknownst to me, I did a Birds, Buffalo, Springfield, Hollies T-shirt, and I put all 3 logos on my shirt. And I went to a Crosby, Stills, and Nash concert on November 13th, 1982, at the Rosemont Horizon.
Right.
And somehow I got backstage with my friend Michael Bush, and we didn't know what to do. And I saw this guy going from dressing room to dressing room, and I'm thinking, and Michael goes, that's the guy, that's Henry Diltz. I go, yeah, from Tiger Beat magazine. So he finally comes over to us, and we introduced each other to our, and I said, excuse me, are you Henry Diltz that used to photograph the Monkees for Tiger Beat magazine? Those are the exact words. And he said, yes, how did you recognize me? Well, you haven't changed very much. And then we exchanged cards. And on the business card, it said, Monkees Voice and Heart Convention Coordinators. And then years later, when
your business card.
On my business card.
Not mine.
And then years later, I started scanning Henry's journal. And I made it in his journal on that day.
Wow.
As Monkey Convention Guy.
Wow.
He didn't remember my name.
Did it say Dreamy Monkey Convention?
No, Monkey.
But Gary, you say these dates, December 13th, you're just making that up, right?
No.
You're just saying any old date, right?
Gary Strobel is the Rain
that?
Man of the Monkees world. Give him a date, he'll tell you what song broke,
the
what
Rain
monkey,
Man.
right?
True.
But Gary, you did get one thing wrong.
Yeah.
That it wasn't Davy that always got the girl.
Oh, right.
Oh my gosh. I've been waiting so silently to mention Princess Gwen.
Yes.
Lucky Peter. Wow.
I was actually going to ask if anybody knew how Mike felt about Princess Gwen in real life.
Well, he talks about it on one of the episodes, right? Isn't there an interview or something?
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, he does talk about it. But what's really interesting, that character of Gwen reminds me of that character that Cher did on the Sonny and Cher show. I don't know what that barroom,
Oh, right. Yeah.
I don't know what her character is, but that voice.
Yeah.
She borrowed that from Michael Nesmith.
Oh, interesting.
And then Mike dressed up like that again in television parts.
That's right.
I wanted to mention that. I was a still photographer on every day of all those television parts. I mean, it must have been 3 months of filming every day, and they had just the greatest musicians and Jay Leno and
Gary Shandling, Whoopi Goldberg.
That's the one. Yeah,
Yep.
it's Miss Maryland, and
Right.
Michael's in the Chinese restaurant dressed up like a
chick.
like a contestant.
Yeah.
That it's hysterical.
That was such a great show, television parts,
Yes.
And the network somehow put it, I think they put it like at midnight or 11:30, something late at night.
Well, that was in the end, but no, it followed Seinfeld, I think.
It's a brilliant show, variety show that not enough people have seen.
Now, Jay, I know you had some questions as well, and I don't want to completely hog it.
Oh,
And
no,
you've got a guy who's seen it all when it comes to the music.
You know what? I got to tell you, Dave, you've done such an amazing job, and I have to just say that first of all, it's like it's been an honor just to be in this little circle here because I've been as you guys have been telling these amazing stories, and which as a fan, I've loved every minute of it. I've honestly enjoyed more listening than contributing, and I because it just has been fantastic. I've also been reading the questions over here on the right. I didn't do that the first half, and then I saw some questions come up, and there was one. I'll tell you what. You know what? Do me a favor. Talk amongst yourself for a second here. I'm gonna go back. There was a question I saw that actually I wanted to ask that I saw someone ask. So
okay, well,
you guys go ahead.
While we're doing that, I'll fill for a second because I'm trying to pull up an image here, which is kind of nice that we can do this while we're chatting. Gary, when I went out to California, one of the first stops was that you brought me out to meet Mickey Dolenz at his office. And
right.
and he was such a nice guy, and I had brought along a photograph that I was hoping to get him to autograph, but I was very reticent about it. I didn't want to seem pushy or anything. And Mickey was behind his desk and talking to us and just very matter of fact and plain. And all of a sudden he looked over and he goes, what, have you got something there you'd like me to sign? And I said, well, yeah, I would. And he goes, what have you got? So I popped out this picture on him.
Oh, nice.
And
nice.
And he looked at it. And do you remember the first thing he said to me about the picture?
I don't remember.
He looked at that picture of Mickey Dolenz and Paul McCartney sitting on the floor smoking, and he goes, oh man, that was the biggest fucking joint I'd ever smoked in my entire life. And he goes,
there it is. Yeah.
There it is.
Oh my God.
And he goes, we were just chilling at this party, and Paul, he goes, it was so big I thought it was a cigar. He goes, and then lit it up and passed it. He goes, when you look at me in that scene, I am completely baked. And he didn't even have a copy of that photograph at the time. Gary, I have to ask you, when the Monkees hit the high seas, are they the legend and lore is that they're high as kites through that entire episode?
Well, Henry shot so many rolls of that. I don't know why he's got more rolls of that episode than any other episode. And it's like,
because I call that stuff magic picture dust. I have a little of that and let me loose. I'm going to photograph everything. Just it heightens your senses. That's the whole thing. And it makes you happy. And the Dalai Lama says the purpose of life is happiness. So you have a little, sip of a flower, and it just it makes you feel good. It makes you happy. It makes you, so, I mean, really, everybody smoked it. But what was there was a question there.
I was just wondering, how high were the guys in that episode?
Oh,
there are a few scenes where Davey.
Well, I mean,
do
we want to talk about this? Because I tell you, every morning when I got to the set,
right,
and they would get there at 5:30 because they'd have an hour or two of makeup and stuff
right.
and getting dressed. I mean, I would get there at 9 o'clock maybe, and Mickey and I almost every day would go over and climb the ladder up to the rafters where the lights were hung. It was about 3 stories up in the soundstage. And we'd get up there and we'd smoke a little Frotus. And we'd stand there looking down at all the people running around below us, and then we go down. The producers actually liked them too, because it made them more happy, more zany, Right. And the producers actually built a room, which they called the Frotus room, so that the Monkees could go in there and smoke between scenes, because then they would know where they were. Otherwise we might be up in the rafters, we might be off in we might be behind, outside and somebody. But they had a room, so they knew that was where the Monkees would be when they were ready. Okay, boys, we're ready for you, and they wouldn't have to go hunting for them. So
I was going to ask you, not to put anybody on the spot or anything like that, but. And you don't have to name names, obviously, but were they all pretty much about the same on that, or did a couple of them like to do it more than others?
No, Mike didn't so much. I mean, it's funny. I would climb down from the rafters, and then Davey would come up and say, "Hey, man, I've got a little joint in my dressing room. Come on in there, And then Peter Tork would come up and say, "Henry, I have a little piece of hash," and we could go to wardrobe and get a safety pin, and you put the hash on the safety pin and light it, and. Sometimes, I mean, I would get, a little bit high 3 times, to start the day off. I said, I mean,
you were a team player, Henry. You didn't want to.
It's just the magic picture dust.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, everybody, I always say, how do you think all that music came out of Laurel Canyon?
Right.
I mean, everybody had a little smoke of that stuff. I mean,
Gary, now you've scanned all the photographs he took. Was this magic picture dust as helpful as he thinks, or are there 2,000 photographs of people's knees and toes because he was photographing the floor as he's walking along?
No, he was pretty spot on. There's only a few that are out of focus, but otherwise, no, he's.
And those were for artistic reasons.
He's got.
Here, D. Reno says, had a Frotus room at every convention we did.
That's right. That's right. Dawn Reno. We met. She was out at a lot of the conventions we did.
Yeah, we didn't know that you could click to comments, so I just clicked on it now. Didn't notice the comments. So that's cool.
If you have questions, folks, we have a little bit of time left. Go ahead and ask a couple questions. I'll throw them out there. But Jay, you had a question from
I actually found the question that I was going to ask her, and I don't know. This was an interesting one. Something came up about Star Trek in the comments, and then someone, Tricia Irvin, said, "Speaking of Star Trek, is it true that Gene Roddenberry chose the actor for Chekhov because he looked like Davy, and they hope to get young girls to watch Star Trek?" Does anybody know anything about that?
There's a great story in
that is true.
It is true.
Walter in Walter Koenig's book, or no, in Sulu. I'm drawing a blank. George Takei's book.
Yeah,
and George talks about the fact that it was this great moment, and he goes, I'm vying for this, to be on this, and all of a sudden they bring in this young guy, and they put him in a goddamn Davy Jones wig, and they, they're getting him out there, and he goes, and I'm feeling like this is a slam. They're taking my time and giving it to this guy, and he's all worked up, and he comes, he's kind of venting off stage one day, and he comes up and he hears Walter Koenig, who played Chekhov, Pavel Chekhov, swearing and this is bullshit and blah 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 blah. And George walks in, he goes, "You feel the same way?" And he goes, "Yeah, you do too." And he goes, "Exactly." And he goes, and Walter grabs the wig off his head and throws it down. He goes, "I hate this fucking Davy Jones wig." and he's like, "Oh, that's not what I was upset about." He goes, "What were you upset about?" He goes, "You're getting half my lines." And they had this little laugh together. But yeah, he did choose him to have kind of this foreign look, and to kind of spin off on the Davy Jones look, right, Gary?
Yeah, it was based on the success of what was happening with the Monkees, and they created another character specifically to fit that mold. And so, yeah, I mean, I have not talked to him directly, Walter, but I believe he shared that story. It might be on YouTube or something.
Okay,
he does share that story.
Yeah,
I mean, if you look at the teen magazines, oh my gosh, he's got that look.
Yeah, they're definitely very similar.
Yeah.
I did get a kick out of this post from the Oregon Bigfoot Festival. Hello from the Oregon Bigfoot Festival and beyond. We grew up with the Monkees. I think that's an interesting dichotomy. They grew up with the Monkees, and now they're chasing Bigfoot.
And they're chasing Bigfoot.
Yeah, it's kind of a good connection on there. Why wasn't... let me see if we go in here. Tony brings up Nez was not in that episode, really. The Monkees hit the high seas. Do you know why?
Yeah, you got seasick. I remember that, we spent, I don't know, was it 5 days or several days?
3 days.
3 days out on an actual, boat out on the, in the
San Pedro.
San Pedro in the ocean. And it was, a little choppy sometimes. The boat would, and I remember Mike getting seasick, he was kind of getting queasy, and they had a little boat come up to the side and put him in there and took him off the shore. And they had to continue with just the three of them. And you were saying, were we really high there? Well, there would be downtime because they'd have to switch the cameras and switch everything around. After every scene, there would be a long break while they moved the cameras, moved the lights, moved the baffles, whatever they did, and get it set up for the next scene. And that could sometimes be a half an hour. And so Mickey and I would go out on the back of the boat, the fantail, the very rear, and we would sit there and have a little smoke, and it was great. And then he'd jump right up and get back in the scene. I marveled at that. And I'd be there just taking millions of pictures.
I've got you're kind of, I think you're sugarcoating a little bit, Uncle Henry. I think you're taking some of the power away from just how high the Monkees really were in that episode. I've got a photograph here. Let me pull it up, and I'm sure this is a Henry Diltz photograph. So let me this is the nice thing about the internet. We can do this live while we're on the air. You tell me those two guys are not high as kites.
They are.
Mickey's got his eyes closed. Yeah. Yeah. Mickey looks a little bit more stoned than the other two.
Yeah, he looks messed up.
Peter just looks like he's in a mellow. Peter looks like, I think
you know, when we would do that, we would never like cripple ourselves. You know, I mean, it's like drinking a fine wine. You know, you drink a glass. I mean, you don't drink a couple of bottles. You know, then it's not fine. So we just.
I've been enjoying some rum during the show tonight.
There you go. Yeah. Just boy.
Who do you think, Henry? I'm curious from your perspective, knowing the guys. Who do you think is the most underappreciated of the Monkees?
You know, maybe Mike. Maybe. I mean, he was kind of the quiet guy, right, and not the zany.
You would think when you were going from that level of absolute genius, he would be the most underappreciated because.
Yeah, I mean, he was.
Yeah.
So he was such a deep thinker. I mean, he had his own think tank. You know, he's produced movies, actual films. You know, and. See,
I always felt like Peter got kind of the short end of the stick, being kind of portrayed as the idiot, the doofus, when he was highly intelligent. He was I think every time I'd seen them, to be honest with you, he was the funniest in person of all of the Monkees. Am I wrong on that, Gary? I mean, you knew them intimately.
Yeah.
And I don't mean intimately, but you knew them. You were very close from. Maybe you knew them intimately. I'm not here to judge. If you can't love the one you want, love the monkey you're with, I guess.
You know, Peter had the toughest role to play because he had to dumb it down for the character he was portraying on the show. But he was like really a brilliant mind. I mean, his dad was an English professor. I mean, you gave him the book, the Yogananda book, right?
Right. Autobiography of a Yogi.
Yeah.
And he was always into
and he was reading during the breaks, and Henry's got photos of him on that couch from Monkees Blow Their Minds, and there he is intently reading that book. So he was just very articulate, well-spoken. You know, when it showed up in the teen magazines that he wanted to be president, he could have been the president because he was so knowledgeable about world issues. He was already thinking about all that back in 1966 and 67.
Very caring guy. Very caring
oh
guy.
Gosh, yeah. Well, that's why he gave away all of his money.
Yeah.
These people all kind of clung on to him, and he had that Wally Cox house that he bought, and people would live there and eat.
Well, he supported a lot of friends.
Yeah.
That was beautiful. Yeah.
Who was it? There was a story. I'm trying to remember who it was. I just saw it in a documentary recently where they were like, then they pulled up and there was Peter Tork's house and there were all these hippies naked in the yard. And when we got out of the car, they quickly ran and put their clothes on. And we were like, why'd you put your clothes on? And they took their clothes off and joined the fun.
It's California in the sunshine. There's a great big swimming pool. And that's what happened. You know, after Peter left that house, Stephen Stills took it over. And then it was Crosby, Stills, Nash naked in the swimming pool with their little friends.
Well, we have landed at 2 hours here. I can't tell you how much it means. Again, guys, you know, you've been a part of my life for 40 years, Henry and Gary, and you've been friendly. And what I love is the fact that, you know, we can go 15 years without hearing from one another. And every time we do connect, it's that same love and sweetness that you guys give out to me. So thank you.
That's the beauty of the Monkees. I mean, that is the thread between all of us, you, Jay, and all the people out there. Thank you for listening in. I mean, it's
that's been an honor.
Timeless thing.
It is timeless. It is timeless. They're one of the few things that is a timeless a TV show. I think that show is going to go on once we have to go into the next room and the music as well. But I just want to tell you really quickly, I went to the last show at the Greek Theater, and there wasn't any backstage because of the pandemic and all that. Oh,
no, go ahead. I'm still listening.
So I'm outside with my friends Denise and Lisa, two Lisas and Jody. And this is like an hour after the show. And there's Michael being escorted out with security. And he's moving very slowly. And a fan came up to him and shared a story. And I thought, oh, I don't want to bother him. He's been on the road for 2.5 months. I don't want to bother him. But after he spent a few minutes with this woman, and he was still moving very slowly, I said to myself, I think I need to go thank him. So I went over there, and they stopped, and I said, Michael, thank you for doing this for all of us. And I said, did you get the photo of you and Mickey in Hawaii at the very first concert? I sent it to his email, and he said, no. And I said, check your email. And then there were 3 security guys from the Greek Theater, and they said, back off. And then Dan Mapp, who was their road manager, said, no, he's with us. And I very gently shook his right hand, and I said, I love you, Michael. And he said, I love you, Gary. And so I didn't know he was going to leave us a couple weeks later, 2.5 weeks later. But anyway,
he did it his way.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I've said. He did it on his own terms. He left us on his own terms. And, but I thanked him for all of us. You know, whether you met him or not, I thanked him for all of us. So.
He is now truly the infinite rider on the big dog, right?
Oh my gosh, yes.
One of my favorite albums of Papa Nez. I do want to play one quick clip before I let you guys go and have each one of you weigh in on it, because this was the final question that I got to ask of the Monkees, Peter and Mickey, when we had that convention. And let me pull it up here.
A wonderful organization. I've done a lot of charity work for the foundation, raising money, playing golf tournaments, and appearing places, because it really has a wonderful foundation. But the actual induction process, the whole Hall of Fame thing, is not a public affair. It is not a democratic affair like, say, the National Football League Hall of Fame, where it's all the leagues and all the players and all that. It's a private country club, essentially, created by these 3 guys, very talented, smart guys. Actually, now only 2, because one of them passed away. 1 journalist and 2 guys from the record industry. And they said one day, we want to start our own little private club called the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and we're just going to let in who we want, and we're not going to let in who we don't want. And that's always been the way it is. And if you understand that, then that's their right. It's their club. It's their country club, and they can let in whoever they want or not have in whoever they don't want. And so it's not up to you or me or the sales or popularity or any sort of people's choice of war. Or lightning in a bottle. It is strictly their private little club, and they have every right to do that.
That, of course, the question posed to them was how they felt about not being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And I'm just curious, in the pantheon of music and legends, and Henry, you've met them all. Do you believe that the Monkees deserve a place in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Oh, hold on one second. We've got you muted. Let me bring you back up.
Music is a big part of all of our lives. We all share that, and they were a big part of the music of our lives. So for sure. Yeah.
I think it's fascinating how many bands that hit it big in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s in interviews will tell you the Monkees were a massive influence on them.
Yeah.
Their first step into music, and that they're snubbed like this. I get the idea it's a private boys club. But Gary, why do you think that they haven't yielded in all this time?
I don't know the powers that be that control that. I mean, I don't know them personally, but I just think that there are so many bands that are excluded from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame that meet the criteria, and the Monkees broke major ground. Moog synthesizer, they're one of the earliest bands to have that in their music. The Doors started using it, and many groups obviously followed that. But it's it's a controlled. Jan Wenner is sadly, there's certain people he will not. I mean, you can name, Paul Revere and the Raiders have had the longevity and have had enough hits and made some great records, and the Turtles. Some of these bands will never because of this small group of narrow-minded people. And sadly, you can get 100,000 votes, but it doesn't matter because it's this. I don't know how many people are on their panel, 12
Right.
or I don't know what it is.
Probably it's one or two people, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just incredibly sad and it's inexcusable. That
Well, the
some-
music is still there. The whole
Yeah.
thing is
Right.
still there for us.
Well, as Mickey said back in the 60s, he says we don't need Rolling Stone to give us good stuff. So maybe that comment stayed with Jan Wenner for all these years, and
Probably,
and it
yeah.
just stuck in his craw that I'm not going to let, no matter what. Well, it's the same thing. Yeah, there were some other things on MTV where a song "Heart and Soul" from the Pull It album had all this incredible response, but somebody that had the power said we're not going to play the video, and that kind of thwarted the success of that song in the album. So
Well, everybody doesn't get the Medal of Honor, and everybody doesn't win an Oscar. It's so, but it doesn't take anything away from them, really.
Right. Jay,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
Well, this is a very, very touchy subject for me, and I'm gonna be very frank and very candid about my feelings about it, but I'm not gonna say it with as many obscenities as I do when I'm usually telling my wife how I feel about it. Two of my favorite bands have been left out for quite a long time. Obviously, the Monkees and Duran Duran. I feel like both of them. There are some real trailblazing going on there. And I don't know, they had Duran Duran come on a couple of years ago and they inducted Roxy Music. And that was a little bit of a moment where I felt like, okay, maybe this is a teaser, maybe we're going to see that happen. But like you were talking about the Moog earlier, I think I remember reading it. I don't remember if this is the truth, but I think wasn't it them and Emerson, Lake and Palmer on Lucky Man? I think were like two of the first hits that ever had the Moog on it. If I remember correctly, I think it was those two hits, both huge iconic moments. The problem I had with the entire Rock and Roll Hall of Fame thing, and I do believe I found myself really getting fired up when you're talking about Rolling Stone. The big problem I have with it is this: there are certain artists, and I will leave them nameless. They don't even perform rock and roll. They're not rock and roll artists. They have been put into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This has been going on since, I mean, artists that I cannot see being considered rock artists. Now, if you're going to call them a pop artist or whatever, there's rap artists that have been put in. There's people that have been put in that I feel like I just don't think that those artists get to be put to the front of the line when you've got bands out there that were literally paving the road for people, be it in music video, live concert. We were talking about Duran Duran using the video screens in their shows. They were one of the first bands to ever use them in that big, theatrical way they use them, and in the use of music video and everything else. I get very angry because I don't understand that process where, and now granted, I've stuck up though for certain bands like Run DMC, who I feel like Run DMC's in the Rock Hall of Fame, but I feel like Run DMC, if it weren't for Run DMC, we may not have Aerosmith today, and I feel like that was a big thing, the way they crossed over rock and rap. And I think they completely belong there. I think that they contributed to rock music, but there are other artists that I see this year. I think Jay-Z's going in. I don't see Jay-Z going in before the Monkees in a real world, fair world scenario. So I don't know how those decisions are made. I don't know how, and if that's true too. And I made this comment to my wife, if we're going to go there, then maybe Garth Brooks belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And maybe there are some country artists, maybe Glenn Campbell belongs in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Definitely.
So if we're gonna cross those genres and we're gonna blur those lines, then you have to blur them all kinds of directions. And I think that those lines were blurred a little bit too much before we get the core people who really put us where we are today in rock music. So
if anything should tell us that tale, it's the fact that the Monkees hit. And although there is the rumor that they outsold the Beatles and the Rolling Stones in 1967, Mike Nesmith admitted that he created that false narrative as a joke on the media. But that they hit as big as they did in the 60s, and that they resurfaced in the 80s and were explosive and huge and massive headliners, and that they came back in the 90s, and that in the 2000s they released new albums that charted in the top 10, and in the 2020s they did it again. That is better than a lot of the classic bands that are just
that are in there.
Right. So, but here's the thing that we as Monkee fans get to enjoy. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is a building full of dusty artifacts. The Monkees belong to the world, and the music that they create belongs to all of us, and the joy that they shared, and the love, and all of the creativity that they took from the beginning of that show in 1966 and continued with until November of 2021. That's what we've got, and that's why they will always endear, and that's why they will always endure. So we don't need 4 walls and a roof to tell us that these guys are Rock and Roll Hall of Famers, because they are, and they always will be. And with that, Henry Diltz, thank you so much for your compassion and love for music, and for doing these kind of shows with me. You've stepped in through the years to do this, so thank you.
Sure thing.
Gary, it's been a pleasure being your friend for 40 years. I hope that we continue on for another 40 when you turn 211, you blood-sucking vampire. It's time you age, you freak of nature. You still got your full head of hair. I got nothing. I don't think that's fair. Is that the trade-off because I never paid for the goddamn Monkee albums?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. So thank you both. Jay, it was a pleasure to have you on and be a part of this with me, buddy. It's
a huge pleasure.
And to Dan Eckhart,
I want to say something real quick too. Rosanna and I, back when Davey passed away, Rosanna and I did a video of Daydream Believer that we put out, and literally we had thousands of people from around the world that had commented on that video, and it said some amazing stuff. And our YouTube got hacked, and that video disappeared. And I mean, we lost so much from that. So tonight was a really good way to feel like we were, myself, especially being a part of something like this, it meant the world to me that you would ask. And it's meant the world to me to meet the two of you and obviously to hear your stories. So thank you.
Well, for everybody that's tuned in tonight and spent 2.5 hours with us, thank you for sharing this journey. And I hope that it was cathartic, and that the grief that we hold for the loss can be overshadowed by the happiness that we all share.
Yay.
Peace
and
and
Happy New Year. Peace and love.
Happy New Year.
Bye,
Hooray.
everybody.
Hugs to you, and stay healthy and be safe, okay?